Bespoke radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Yeah. How you doing? Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Today's Tuesday, December 13th. 348 days into the new year, just 18 days left. Would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black. For KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planets. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? How you doing? Fade to Black, man. Dancers are dancing. Tonight, Ralph Ellis. Yes, yes, yes. Ralph Ellis is here. We're going to talk about his book, Mary Magdalene, Princess of Orange. Just the title of the book is enough, right? Ralph Ellis, man. Can't wait. Tomorrow night, Alex Mistretta is going to be here, live in the bunker, by the way, to talk about his latest Bigfoot expedition. He did it with Steve Murillo and Rick Sinnott. Yeah, going to tell us all about it. Thursday night is another Fader night with John Rappaport and his No More Fake newsroom. Then followed by open lines all night long. The call-in number is 323-825-5045. Going to take phone calls tonight, too, with Ralph a little bit later. And then, that's Thursday, and then Friday, and heading into the weekend, I'll be over hosting at Coast to Coast AM, sitting in for George on Friday, and my guest will be Douglas Rushkoff. And then Saturday, my guests will be Ralph Ellis and Howard Bloom. Ralph has never done Coast to Coast. And it was just one of those things. I was like, wait a minute, Ralph, you haven't done Coast? Come hang out with us on Saturday. That's how we do it, man. We pull in the family. Ralph Ellis has never done Coast to Coast. It just doesn't even make any sense. Man, the Coast audience is going to be blown away. Think about, go back to the first time that you heard Ralph here on Fade to Black. Remember that? Remember what kind of night that was? And then immediately after that, we did like a full month of Ralph. Part 1, 2, 3, 4. Or 1, 2, 3. Did we do 4? Seems like it. Had to. And then Ralph had to go off and he had to write a research paper and do a couple of things. But he is back tonight. And just in time, right? And then he'll be over at Coast to Coast with us on Friday. All right. Let's see. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. YouTube, you know what to do. Follow, like, and subscribe over at the website. You can email throughout the show tonight. I'll get to as many as I can. Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. You know what's kind of funny? A lot of the questions that I'll bust out during the show. Please visit all of our sponsors for great gift giving ideas. Life Change Tea, Go right now to getthetea.com, and it's easy to do. All of the banners for our sponsors are in front of us, and just go and click on those banners at jimmychurchradio.com. That's all you got to do. Use the promo code Jimmy for Life Change Tea, either online or over the phone, and get free shipping. Check out River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Promo code there is F2B Blend, 15% off of your order. Great gift-giving idea. Studio Dome, Fade or Not Special. Yes, it's stereo, true wireless stereo, high-fidelity system. 2 SPB2 speakers and power in a case, $129. JCRTWS is the promo code. All the promo codes are on the banners. And then, of course, Zyppah, ZYPPAH. Stop snoring today. Just go to Zyppah.com, ZYPPAH. And for all of you military guys, man, they got a camo. They got a camo Zyppah. Check it out. The first big conference of the season is coming up. It's coming up in February, the Conscious Life Expo, February 10th through the 13th at the LAX Hilton right here in Los Angeles. We'll be broadcasting Fade to Black that Friday from the Plaza Ballroom. That's Friday the 10th. And then I'll be hosting the Ancient Aliens panel on Saturday. Saturday, there's events all weekend long. George Norrie has got his Coast to Coast event, a bunch of panels. Just come and hang out. Some of the speakers, and for Fade to Black, as you know, when we do these conferences and we broadcast live, we'll bring 10, 12, 14 guests through the show in 3 hours. We're going to do the same thing at the Conscious Life Expo with David Wilcock, Corey Good, Richard Dolan, Linda Moulton Howe, David Hatcher-Childress, Mike Barra, Nassim Haramain, Laurie McDonald, Jason Martell, Sean Stone, William Henry, Danny Sheehan, Whitley Strieber, Daniel Brinkley, Laura Eisenhower, Del Bigtree is going to be running around there too as well, and Lisa Garr. All right, let's get the show cracking. Today, Tom DeLonge is 41 years old. Steve Buscemi is 59. Ted Nugent is 68. Look, I got to do Ted. Ted changed the guitar world, man. And his song Hibernation from Double Live Gonzo, one of the great shreds of all time. So forget about everything else. Ted, you'll make the list because of Double Live Gonzo. Also today, Morris Day is 59. All right. On this day in history, in 2003, where were you? Saddam Hussein was captured. Remember that breaking news? Remember that? Remember those press conferences they would do from Baghdad? And they did that Saddam Hussein press conference. He was hiding in a hole in the ground, 8 feet underground, 9 miles outside of his hometown of Tikrit. Had the beard, hadn't shaved, probably stunk. There you go. Saddam Hussein was captured. Fate or fact, 51.5% of deaths for hip-hop musicians are homicide. 19.3% of deaths for metal musicians are suicide. Yeah, and that is a fate or fact. Well, early, Rita hit me with the news that Trump and Bill Gates were hanging out, right? And I'm like, say what? She goes, is this a WTF moment or what? And Gates came out of that saying that Trump is the new JFK. The Microsoft boss actually says the new president will unite the country through innovation. Now, I'm not making this up. It actually happened. You know what else happened today? Alan Thicke passed away here in Burbank at St. Joe's Medical Center, right down the street here. So, R.I.P. Rest in peace, Alan Thicke. But I'm not making this up. it really happened. Both Alan Thicke, who had a heart attack while playing hockey with his son, it happened. He was 69 years old. And then this Bill Gates JFK thing. And then there's more. Today was pretty nutty. But Bill Gates discussed a telephone conversation that he had with President-elect Trump on television today on CNBC. How does Trump have a conversation with Bill Gates? I just want to know. Trump's a good businessman and all of that, and he's got lots of money. Nothing like Gates. But I'm just talking about the matching of the mentalities, right? I said I'll support whoever gets into the Oval Office. So when he gets there, he's got my back, or I got his back. But until then, something like this happens, and I just want to be the fly on the wall. What were they talking about? What on earth could or would they talk about? I mean, can you imagine? What were they talking about? On what level was there a connection? But wait. Let me get comfortable because there's more. Trump, Gates said, was interested in talking about innovation, which Bill considered to be a good thing. And then he dropped this bomb. In the same way President Kennedy talked about the space mission and got the country behind that, Trump could unite people through innovation. And I just got to say, what the hell could Donald have said that would make Gates say something like that? Because I know that Bill is smart. He is, for sure. He is. He's a smart guy. But what was Trump selling him? I don't know. But he bought it, and he bought all of it. He bagged it up and took it home. It was heavy, too, what was ever in that bag. Because then, later today, Gates showed up at Trump Tower. Shows up at Trump Tower for a face-to-face meeting with the president-elect. And I wonder what that conversation was. Something was said during that phone call, and it was crazy enough for Bill to jump. When does Bill jump? I'm talking about bam. When does Bill ever jump? He doesn't have to, and he doesn't, really. But what was said in that phone call? Today, he shows up at Trump Tower. Trump doesn't own a computer. He doesn't know what Microsoft Word is, Excel. He doesn't know what Skype is. Doesn't know these things. Doesn't know. He can barely tweet. Well, now he can tweet pretty good, but he doesn't know what email is. He has no idea. Windows 95. Throw Trump off. Just what's Windows 95? Oh, we installed those at Trump Plaza. Double pane. But Gates went on to say this about their sit-down. I'm going to quote his entire statement. I had an opportunity to talk to him about innovation. A lot of his message has been about a lot of things, but how he sees things as not as good as he would like. But in the same way that John F. Kennedy talked about the space mission and got the country behind that, I think that whether it's education or stopping epidemics or other health breakthroughs, finishing polio, and in this energy space, there can be a very upbeat message that his administration is going to organize things, get rid of regulatory barriers, and have American leadership through innovation. It'll be one of the things that he gets behind. And of course, my whole career has been along those lines, and he was very interested in listening to that. And I'm sure there will be further conversation, end quote. I'm not making this up, people. Talking to reporters on his way out, Gates, did you see the video of this, by the way? Gates called it a good time. And again, said that they spoke about innovation. And this was going on. As this was going on, Kanye West walks into Trump Tower for his meeting with the Donald. You just can't make this stuff up, man. You can't do it. I know you think I am. But back to Gates. That statement that he released. We're talking about Bill Gates, man. He's got a juice card. He can do whatever he wants. Why didn't one of the richest guys in the world confront the Donald on his climate change denials? That's my question. And that's what's missing here. On Sunday, I reported this yesterday. On Sunday, he announced his $1 billion climate change fund. Right? And today, this. It just doesn't make sense. Why didn't he confront Donald? Why didn't he come on? Why wasn't his statement the opposite of this? I spoke to him and said, dude, why this denial on climate change? Why didn't he do that? It was an opportunity. Instead, he was sold. He sold out. Something went down between the two of them. I don't know what it is. I don't know what. Something influenced Gates so much that he backpedaled. After 2 days after announcing a $1 billion climate change fund, free renewable energy, greenhouse gases, huge announcement, 20-year fund. And then this today, I don't know. But just think about that conversation. It was magical, magic, fairy dust. You know, what they should have talked about was this gem of a press release that also happened today. Today was strange. Did you even get a whiff of this? Well, hopefully, after you listen, you're going to go click, you're going to go search, and you're going to go find out about this. New analysis from NASA's Mars Curiosity rover shows that the red planet is likely flush with organics. That's the leadoff of the press release. Jennifer Eigenbrode, a biochemist and geologist at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, says, and I'm quoting here, I am convinced that organics are all over Mars. They're all over the surface, and they're probably through the rock record. What that means is something we'll have to talk about. End quote. Say what? Really? Today, Tuesday, scientists will present additional findings from Curiosity, which 4 years ago landed on Mars, as we know, and the planet most like Earth in our solar system, to explore a mountain of sediments rising from the center of a 96-mile wide impact crater. The rover quickly accomplished the primary goal of its mission, which was to determine if Mars ever had the chemical ingredients and suitable environments to support microbial life. With strong evidence that Mars indeed was habitable at some point in its past and may still be today, scientists began using the rover to learn about possible niches for life and how evidence of it might be preserved. Listen to me. A key part of the search focused on organics, a quest that has led to the surprising discovery that organic matter may be widely distributed on Mars. This is the press release today. She went on to say, to me, this is the biggest take-home message 4 years ago, we would have never said this, end quote. Scientists don't know the source of the organics, nor how the material has managed to survive in the harsh radioactive environment of Mars. It was found in samples drilled out from rocks and chemically analyzed. Whether biological or geologic in origin, a rich supply of organics has implication not only in its search for past life, but also in supporting future endeavors, such as, are you ready for this? This is the press release. Farming. That organic matter could be really important, she said. The door is really open here to an expanded habitability potential. In related research, California Institute of Technology geologist John Grotzinger said Curiosity, which has been slowly making its way up Mount Sharp, has found multiple examples of primary indigenous minerals being altered. What this is telling us is that sedimentary basin is a chemical reactor, that those primary materials are being converted under different chemical circumstances into different minerals. He said this during a National Academy of Sciences workshop. We're not sure what all of this means, but it's pretty exciting for habitability. The Curiosity team has also made progress on locating potential types of rocks that could preserve evidence of past life. The most promising find, according to Grotzinger, has been a silica-rich rock, which is chemically similar to early rocks on Earth that have been found to contain fossil cells. As Curiosity climbed up Mount Sharp, it has also discovered an increasingly enriched concentrations of boron inside rock fractures. On Earth, boron is tied to the formation of ribose, a key component, obviously, to RNA. Scientists plan to present any new results from the Curiosity mission starting today at the American Geophysical Union Conference, being held this week in San Francisco. This is really, really big news. Why was this under the radar today? Why wasn't this the lead story on all of mainstream media? This is one of the reasons why, as I went through all of this today and yesterday, dealing with Gates and Bezos and their new $1 billion 20-year fund for green energy and greenhouse gases and climate and so forth, that was a really big deal. And then to turn around today and have Gates have this meeting with Trump and have him backpedal. Trump has already backpedaled. He said, I'm going to rethink this climate change thing. When one of his platforms while he was running was that China was creating climate change to harm our economy, right? And why... In 48 hours, how Gates could do this turnaround. What I'm confused about with Gates and why nobody is speaking about this today is if there's one guy that should have backbone and stand up, because he's got nothing to lose. There's nothing that can harm Bill Gates. Nothing. So go and speak your mind with the Donald, man. But there was something in the phone call. Something that prompted him to turn around and go to Trump Tower and go in and have a face-to-face. Who does that? I mean, Bill Gates, he doesn't care. The last thing that Bill Gates cares about is the president of the United States. He doesn't have to care about anybody on planet Earth or their concerns. He's on his own thing and will always be. I mean, seriously. For Gates, going to the White House, an invitation is one of those things. You take the invitation, you open it up, and you look at it, and you throw it away. You throw it in a drawer. What was that? Invitation to the White House, man. We got stuff to do this weekend. That's the truth. And then this surprise meeting at Trump Tower. And then at the same time, that stuff, which is there in front of us, being covered the wrong way. we have this about Mars. Crazy news day. I'll say this really quick again. R.I.P. Robin Thicke. Robin Thicke, for those of you that are too young to know, he was a big deal. He's a big deal, man. He was a big deal in the 80s, and funny guy, funny dude, was in all of our homes every night, and you know, to have a heart attack in front of your son while playing hockey at that tender age of 69 is a bit upsetting for all of us. You know, he was just a good guy. Robin, I just said Robin. Alan, did I say Robin? Oh, man. His son is Robin Thicke. But anyway, Alan Thicke to pass away today is a big deal. All right, so let's get out of here. Let's get Ralph Ellis in. Tonight we are going to cover Mary Magdalene, the Princess of Orange. And just like I said, just that title says something, doesn't it? It's not the story you think. It's Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Email is jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. You can follow me on Twitter @jchurchradio. I'll be right back. The one and only Ralph Ellis. Stay right there.
You're listening to Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Fade to Black will now pause for alien identification.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio. When you take the beans from Central America with dashes of Indonesian and African mixed in and then roast it to the dark side of Fade to Black, you create the ultimate brew of fringe. Introducing the Fade to Black blend from River Moon Coffee. Yes, River Moon's darkest customized roast was created for the love of Fade to Black. The alchemy of masterful roasting and smoking the beans is in every sip of this full-bodied, dark Java. I need my coffee dark, deep, with distinct bittersweet chocolate highlights, just like the bunker. Leaning further into the darkness of the roast is Fade to Black blend from River Moon Coffee. Just click on the banner at jimmychurchradio.com and use the promo code F2BBLEND for 15% off of your order today. Go Beckley Teppy.
Hi, folks. It's a holiday season with hope in the air. Things to look forward to and no time for despair. Health can be a challenge, and so can the mail. So Get the Tea wants to help you by giving you a sale. Buy 2 months of Super Tea and get 1 month for free. No limit. That's buy 2 months of Super Tea and get 1 month free. That's a savings of $35. Where? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Scroll down on the front page and find the Buy 2, Get 1 free ad. Click it and save. Orders over $100 get free shipping. Send the gift of life. Change tea at GetTheTea.com. We have many non-GMO organic supplements just waiting for you. This holiday season, enjoy health and Thanksgiving with GetTheTea.com. Want to call us? 928-308-0408. That's 928-308-0408. GetTheTea.com is a proud sponsor of Doing What's Right. That's GetTheTea.com.
9 out of 10 geneticists agree.
Fade to Black is not your father's radio show on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the planet.
Hi, this is Chase Kletsky with Fate Magazine Radio, and you're listening to Jimmy Church and Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station, where the Fade or Nots rock.
Hi, this is Rob Reiner from Anvil, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? I'm Chris. What up? This is Kyle Massey, and you're listening to Jimmy Church Radio.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Ralph Ellis is here. We're going to talk about his book, Mary Magdalene, the Princess of Orange. Tomorrow night, Alex Mistretta is going to be here live in the bunker to talk about his latest Bigfoot expedition. Thursday night, another Fader night with John Rappaport and his No More Fake Newsroom. Then Friday, I am over at Coast to Coast, sitting in for George Norrie. My guest on Friday is Douglas Rushkoff. And then on Saturday, my guest will be Ralph Ellis. And a little Howard Bloom, too, as well. Tonight, we have Ralph here with us. He's been researching biblical and Egyptian history for more than 30 years. Being independent from theological and educational establishments allows Ralph to tread where others do not dare. And it is through his independence that Ralph has discovered so many new biblical and historical truths. His books include Jesus, Last of the Pharaohs, Eden in Egypt, Adam and Eve were Pharaoh, Akhenaton, and Nefertiti, the King Jesus Trilogy, Cleopatra to Christ, Jesus, the great-grandson of Cleopatra, Thoth, Architect of the Universe, and his latest work, the Grail Cypher. Tonight we're going to discuss his book, Mary Magdalene, Princess of Orange, and I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, the one and only Ralph Ellis. Ralph, it's good evening from me, but good morning to you, sir. How are you?
It's good morning over here. We're 3:30 in the morning over here, and I didn't bother going to sleep this time. I thought I'd see it through.
Oh,
yeah. Good to be with you again, Jimmy.
It's good to hear your voice, my friend. And this is the thing. We've done so many shows together, and we've become friends. But for the audience out there that is here tonight because they've heard about you from the show, or maybe seen a video or two out there that you and I have done, or that you've done with others. I would like to, because we're going to discuss Mary Magdalene tonight, and your take here is as interesting as anything that you've ever put together, for sure. So,
well, as you said, where people don't, other people fear to tread, I go on and just say it. This one goes off the beaten track somewhat. It goes into areas that no one else has looked at. And it's an interesting book, actually. I thought this was a little bit of a side issue, a cul-de-sac sort of book. But as Michael Tsarian has said, he thinks this is my seminal work. This is my greatest book that I've written. And sort of looking at it, I think, well, yeah, maybe he's right, because this is the sort of book that ties in history with the modern world, because, people look at my research on ancient biblical history and they think, well, what's that got to do with the 21st century?
Direct connections.
Well, this book.
Direct connections.
Yeah.
Direct connections. And so what I would like to do is this, is we have, I want to do a brief setup for Mary and do a little bit of history in Jerusalem that predates her and her travel across the Mediterranean and then into southern Europe.
Who is she?
Right.
Who is this Mary Magdalene? Yeah. She's not the person you think she is. The Gospels like to say she's a nobody, she's a prostitute, all the rest of it. Well, that's typical demonization for someone they don't like. It looks like she was someone totally different. And I proved this in a way from two directions, because I proved that the biblical Jesus was Jesus of Gamala, who's a relatively well-known person within the books of Josephus Flavius. And then Professor Robert Eisen wrote his enormous great book on James, the brother of Jesus. And he took about 300-400 pages to prove that Mary and Martha Bothus, were the Bethany sisters. Mary and Martha of Bethany. And of course, Mary of Bethany is Mary Magdalene. And I sort of wrote to him and said, "Congratulations, that's wonderful. You finally proved who she is." And he said, "No, she's not really Mary Magdalene. They just based the life of Mary Magdalene upon Mary Boethus."
And that is right in your wheelhouse right there.
Yeah, I'm thinking, hold on. I know why he's saying that, because if you say that Mary Magdalene was Mary Boethus, it changes her story, and it means that her life was in the AD 60s, not in the AD 30s. And the problem with Mary Boethus is she was the richest woman in Judea.
And on that point, it does. And on that point, I want to get to a couple of things directly. Her dowry was $1 million what?
$1 million gold denarii.
Now, today, 1 million pieces of gold on any level, right? It would mean the same thing back then.
Well, yes, it was 7 tons of gold.
Right. It's a lot. That makes her extremely wealthy.
In pure gold terms, it's about $280 million.
Right.
At the current gold price. But the gold price has slipped. So in terms of the work value you could get from it, so I translated it back into the wages for soldiers. In terms of the work value, it was worth about $20 billion.
Bingo.
And that was just her dowry. That wasn't the wealth of the family. That was the wealth of her dowry. So how much would you give for a dowry? 5%? 10%?
Well, who would you marry? Well, you would marry Mary.
Well, guess who she married?
Right.
She married Jesus of Gamala.
Exactly.
Who was the very person who, before Robert Eisenman wrote his books, he was the very person who I said was the biblical Jesus. So now you have Eisenman saying she is Mary Magdalene, and me saying that this Jesus character was the Jesus character, and the Talmud says that Jesus married Mary Magdalene. That's what it says.
And you know what's funny to me with our conversations that we've had, and most of us have a basic biblical history to us, is that she was always referenced as the one that funded, that bankrolled everything, whether it was food, right?
Yes,
and apparently so. That's all I have to say.
Well, one of the things she did bankroll was Jesus's career. She paid for him to become the high priest of Judea. So they were actually selling. This is simony on a grand scale. They were selling the position of high priest of Jerusalem to the highest bidder. And Mary Boethus, this is Mary Magdalene, paid for Jesus, her husband, Jesus of Gamala, to become the high priest of Jerusalem. And she paid a tarkub of silver, which I've worked out to be about 70 kilos of silver, for him to become the high priest of Jerusalem.
Now, didn't you, to be a high priest, didn't you have to have, I don't want to sound juvenile in this statement, and you can clean it up for me, but you had to have a backup wife, right? You had to have 2 wives, and why is that?
You obviously know your Talmud. The Talmud says that the high priest of Jerusalem must have a second wife as a contingency for the day of reckoning. So he has to have 2 wives. And what Jesus did, and it's quite obvious from the Talmud accounts and also from the biblical accounts of Mary and Martha at Bethany, is the 2 wives of Jesus were the Bethany sisters. So he didn't marry just one of them, he married both, Mary and Martha. And the other secret that they don't really want you to know, and it's given obliquely, is that Mary and Martha were his sisters. So Jesus married his sisters.
Now, and for everybody out there, the Talmud is the Jewish book of law. That's the basic way to put it. It's complicated and it's difficult to get through, right?
It's very complicated. Yes.
It is, but you have done that. So when we're referring to the Talmud, I just want the audience to know that we're talking about the Jewish book of the law. When was it written, actually? It was written around 100
Well,
AD?
that's interesting because they say, it was only written in the 4th century and therefore it was an oral history before it. But of course, it was never an oral history. The Jews throughout history have written everything down, and there's no reason why it wasn't written down. And the main player who actually is quoted is Yohanan ben Zakkai, who was the leader of Judaism after the Jewish revolt in the 1st century. So a lot of the quotations are from Zakkai, who's a 1st century high priest of the New Jerusalem, as it were, after it was destroyed. And strangely enough, they don't even know who this guy is. We've been through this before, but all of the important people, they forget who they are. And they've forgotten who Yohanan is as well. And in one of my books, I say he's probably actually Josephus Flavius, but they don't want to admit that because Josephus Flavius was the Jewish traitor. So they have a bit of a problem with that. Anyway, that's a bit of a by the by. But most of the quotes regarding the Bethany sisters, because the Bethany sisters were 1st century, they were AD 60s, most of the quotes are written by Yohanan ben Zakkai, who's a 1st century character. So this is a 1st century history, a parallel history to the gospel history. So it's from that era. So that makes it very important.
And when we look at this, I mean, with the direct references to Jesus in the Talmud, it feels conflicting with the traditions that we know today, whether Jesus
Well, the first thing is it defeats the idea of the mythicists. They've become quite a strong lobby recently with all their books saying Jesus was a myth. Well, why would the Talmud, the Jewish book of law, be talking about a fictitious character, a mythical character? It's highly unlikely that they would be writing about Jesus and denigrating Jesus because they don't like him, because according to him, he led the revolt that ended up with the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. So obviously they don't like him, and therefore they say he should be boiled in shit and semen and all the rest of it. Now, you would not be saying that if this Jesus character was a mythical character. But on the contrary, they say he's a real character, and they say he was connected with the government and royalty. And in that quote that says that, they call him Jesus the Nazarene.
Right.
Well, that's quite obviously, who else can that be? That is Jesus the Nazarene, and Jesus was a Nazarene, as it says in the Gospels. So it just has to be the same character. They're talking about the same character, and they say he's a prince and a king. And, of course, that changes the Gospel story somewhat.
And so, as we continue with their relationship, which we have discussed before, but let's go through what we need to here so we can move on to Mary directly when she's alone, I should say. So we do the she hangs out, she's with them through the revolution, and let's kind of pick things up there at the end of the revolution. And where is she? She's still by his side, and most importantly here too as well, where is Martha through all of this?
Well, yes, Martha rather drops off the end of the story, although I do suggest that she ended up in France as well. But yes, after the Jewish revolt. So as a bit of background for this, none of this happened in the AD 30s. I've proven time and time again that this was all a tradition about the Jewish revolt. So the revolt that Jesus was involved in was the Jewish revolt of the AD 60s and AD 70. Nothing to do with the AD 30s. And after the revolt has ended, and they lost the revolt, of course, Jesus was crucified, and Yohanan ben Zakkai, this person we've been talking about, the high priest. So now the high and mighty have been fallen, because within the Talmud she's portrayed as a sort of Mary Antoinette, the dung of donkeys, and her foot touches a piece of dung and she dies. Which, of course, that's just trying to illustrate how posh she was and how out of touch she was.
Right, right.
So this is the post-revolt after the Jewish revolt. Jerusalem had been destroyed. It's now a Roman city. All of the Jews, by law, had to leave Jerusalem. There was no Jews were allowed in Jerusalem. And it was rebuilt as a Roman town. And I think no Jews were allowed within sight of the city. So they relocated their capital to Yabne, which is just south of Tel Aviv. And that's where Josephus Flavius had his scriptorium. That's where some of these books were written. And that's where the Sanhedrin was relocated to. The Jewish council or parliament was relocated to Yabne. And all of the Jews, of course, all of the captured Jews were spread around the empire as slaves, or they were exiled, or they ran away, or they went to Jordan, a lot of them, to not to Petra, to Pella, the big exodus to Pella. And so what happened to the biblical family? Well, history, more like mythology, I should say, says that they went to the south of France. They went to Provence. And it says that they went off in a boat. This history comes from Rabanus Maurus, I think, the abbot of, the Bishop of Mainz he was. And he says that Mary Magdalene and Martha, he says, on this occasion, went to Marie Salomère, which is on the Rhone estuary in the south of France. And significantly, he says that they went in a boat without a rudder and without a mast. And that's symbolic, of course, because the mast is phallic, the boat is female.
Right, right.
As you know, all boats are females, but the mast is male because it's a phallic symbol. And also it had no rudder, and the rudder is the navigator. And we'll come on to this when we talk about William of Orange, but all of the male characters of this family were called navigators, Nortoniers. And you'll probably remember that name from Holy Blood, Holy Grail, where all of the Grand Masters of the Priory de Sion were called Nortoniers, navigators. And so this boat had no navigator.
And
we'll come on to that name again.
Sure, sure. And what's interesting here for us is there is so much evidence about Mary in the south of France. I mean,
yes.
So much research has gone into this, and there's enough churches and enough ceremony that goes on to this day celebrating Mary in the south of France that there is, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah, well, there's an awful lot of mythology. There's not a lot of hard evidence, but I was able to tease out some extra evidence that I've not seen looked at before in any of the books I've read. This is something I do all the time. I don't repeat what other people have said. I go around and I research and I come up with my own ideas.
Right.
And one of the things I found there was the tradition of the Orant, which listeners might not have heard of before. But the Orant is a fairly famous figure, is a woman in a position of prayer with her hands up. Almost as if she's surrendering or something, but it's a traditional form of prayer. It's used quite a lot in the Coptic Church. And the question then becomes, who is this Orant and why is she so prevalent in the south of France? And I teased this together from looking at all of the sarcophagi. Luckily, this was a big Roman area in the first centuries, first to the 4th century. This is southern France. This is around the cities of Arles and Nimes. And it was quite wealthy, and there's a lot of very, very good marble sarcophagi left from the 1st to the 3rd century AD. And a lot of them have the Orant on it. But some of them have the Orant and Jesus together. So it's quite obviously we're looking at a Mary character here.
Right.
But then a lot of them have the Orant on their own. So why on these sarcophagi do we have just a Mary on her own, the Orant figure?
Right.
I think it's quite clear that this tradition, this mythology that Mary was in the south of France was very strong, quite prevalent in the 1st and 3rd centuries AD, very early on. And that's why we have these Orants all over the south of France. She is the Mary character. And her name, to Orant, is an Orant, it really means to a public speaker, to speak. But we get this correspondence with the name or, the prefix or being used on all of these references to this biblical family. Because or has several meanings that are linked to this family. So I traced their original family that came from Persia and ended up in Syria, and they were called Orania.
What did how many children did Mary have? Did she have a child in Jerusalem, jump on the boat with a child, and was she pregnant? Did she have 2? Did she have 1? When she arrived in France, did she have siblings with her? I mean, children with her?
Yes. Well, one is mentioned in the Gospels, and he was someone Ben Jesus, Eliza Ben Jesus, I think. Anyway, there's one that's mentioned in the Gospels, and there is one that's mentioned on the boat who is Sarah, and she's said to be the servant of Mary, but quite obviously not, because Sarah means princess, and her name was Sarah. What do they call her? Sarah Lacali.
Yes, that's right. And she's referenced. Yeah, and she's referenced. I'm sorry, I sound like I'm interrupting you. I don't want anybody to think that, but I kind of am. In Sarah's referenced in the south of France too, as well, but there isn't a mention of in the mythology of the sun in the south of France. So can you clear that up? I mean, when she pulled up on the boat, who did she have with her? Was she with child and had her son with them too as well?
I doubt. Yeah, I heard about that, but I doubt if she had the son. You see, Rome was fearful of all heirs coming to the throne, because the Jerusalem revolt was about Jesus wanting to become the next emperor of Rome. And we've discussed that before. And of course, what Rome did not want is any heirs surviving. So there was a pogrom out against any male heirs, but not against the females, because as a female, you could not become the emperor of Rome. So they didn't really worry about the women, which is why Mary was allowed to go on a boat on her own, whereas Jesus was locked up and taken to Rome. And then I say he was taken over to Chester as a prisoner in Britain.
Right.
But the females were okay because they could not become emperor of Rome, so they were not a threat to Rome. And therefore they were allowed to go free. So I very much doubt that there would be a son on board that boat. But certainly there was Sarah Lacali, which means Sarah the Black.
Now, what about Martha? Did she have kids? Did she have any of Jesus?
Don't know, but undoubtedly one would have thought so. If Jesus had 2 wives, they would both have children. I would imagine he probably had something like 8 or 9 children overall. There was one son that I did trace at one point, and I've forgotten his name. I should have remembered it. But Sarah Lecalier is interesting because she is called Sarah the Black again. And of course, we have the tradition in the south of France of the Black Madonnas. And we get a lot of people jumping on this bandwagon. Even some of the researchers jumped on this bandwagon. I think Beauval did as well,
right,
saying they were all Black Africans. But of course, it's got nothing to do with that. This was all symbolic.
Well, let me jump in right there. We've got to take a break, so let's do that now. Let's get that in. Our guest tonight, the one and only Ralph Ellis. We're talking about his book, Mary Magdalene, Princess of Orange. Okay, we've got the setup. The boat without a rudder has arrived in the south of France. It's an amazing story, and only Ralph puts it together like he does. More with Ralph Ellis right after this short break. Stay with us, everybody.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio.
Hello, I'm Magdelene, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black, on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station.
How you doing? It's Jimmy here from Cypher. Today I wanted to tell you about my efforts to achieve global elimination of snoring. It all starts with respect. Respect for yourself and respect for others. Listen, you think you're being a nice guy or a nice girl by letting the guy or girl next to you sleep and snore every night. It's the ultimate disrespect to have that happen. You wake that person up and you tell them, go to Zyppah.com now. ZYPPAH.com. We're not going to tolerate this, all right? Snoring is not okay. Someone next to you is snoring, you tell them to buy a Zyppah. ZYPPAH.com. I know that you're listening to these snoring things and you're thinking, well, it don't apply to me. I don't have these problems. A lot of people are in denial, but it's true. Listen, if you're snoring, you got to stop it. What you got to do is get this fixed. Get a Zyppah and change your life. ZYPPAH.com.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to jimmychurchradio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And this is Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. Yes. We're of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier. And I'm Ari Gold. We're the Honey Brothers. And you're listening to Jimmy Church. The Revolution.
What's up, Fadernauts?
Studio Dome loves Fade to Black and the F2B audience so much that they have put together the ultimate stereo Bluetooth system. They've done it just for you. Man, check this out. The Studio Dome SBB2 stereo system is here. It's featuring 2 Studio Boombox 2 SBB2 wireless Bluetooth speakers, packed in its own custom hardshell case. This Studio Dome system features the very latest in stereo Bluetooth technology. The 2 full-range boomboxes are in true wireless stereo. You've got to hear this. It's amazing. It's just $129, and use the promo code JCRTWS, and you'll also get free shipping. It's simple. Just go to jimmychurchradio.com, click on the Studio Dome banner. Go Beckley Tepe.
This is Micah Hanks of the Grailian Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, across the globe on the Game Changer Radio Network and the one and only KGRA Radio, The Planet.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Ralph Ellis. We're talking about his book, Mary Magdalene, Princess of Orange. Now, Ralph, the boat's arrived, right? We're in the south of France. And what's interesting here, we're talking about colors. We've just talked about black. The book is called Princess of Orange. She changed her colors. She was represented one way in Jerusalem, and now she's wearing other colors, too, as well, that aren't orange. So...
there's lots of symbolism here, and you've got to be able to understand the symbolism. You've got to understand as well why they had this symbolism. And a lot of it has been derived because a lot of this was heretical. You could not say certain things. You could not say certain things about their heritage when they were alive. You know, that Jesus was alive in AD 70. That he was a king, although they do say he's a king, but they try and indicate he wasn't a king even when he was a king and all that sort of thing. So to get around all of these heretical problems that you couldn't mention, but they wanted to preserve, they have this symbolism. And one of the symbols was the blackness. And so you have the black Madonnas from the south of France, and you have Sarah Lakali, which means Sarah the Black in Sanskrit. So they're using Sanskrit there. Why is she black? Well, because the name for Egypt is Kam. That's the ancient name. And Kam means black in Egyptian. So what we have here is an instant reference to someone being of Egypt. And you couldn't say that Mary Magdalene was an Egyptian so easily. So they just said she was black. And then we have the same symbolism with Mary of Egypt. They later on in the 4th century, they invented a Saint Mary of Egypt, who was again said to be black. And she has the same life story as Mary Magdalene. But this wasn't Mary Magdalene really, but it's another way of saying she was Mary of Egypt. They do the same with the Queen of Sheba. They say that she was black again. Why? Because the Queen of Sheba came from Egypt. She didn't come from Ethiopia. It quite clearly says in the Kebra Nagast that she came from Egypt, from southern Egypt. So this was the symbolism game that they were using to identify to those in the know, those with eyes to see, as it says in the Gospels, and ears to hear, who these people really were. So those in the know would know who we're talking about. And so she is Mary Magdalene of Egypt. And Mary the Virgin is Mary the Virgin of Egypt. That's why it says of Jesus, out of Egypt I have called my son. Because they all came from Egypt. They were all royalty from Egypt. And that's where we get the blackness of Sarah Lakali. And interestingly, this matches in with my research on Edessa. Obviously, one of my books is called Jesus, the King of Edessa, where I say he was actually, in the historical record, a king of Edessa. And the kings of Edessa were called, the father of this Jesus character was called King Abgarus Okama. Okama, the Black. He was known as King the Black. Why was he called the Black? Because he was of Egyptian heritage again.
It's so interesting to me how this all, and you do it every time. It all fits together the correct way. And
interesting, just to butt in there a little bit, because it fits in together in 2 or 3 different books that were written 5 years apart.
Right.
I knew nothing about, when I wrote this bit on Mary Magdalene, I had no idea what Edessa was. I'd never heard of the place. And so 5 years later, when I'm researching it, I suddenly find they have the same name and the same symbolism. It's great, isn't it?
And the René Le Chateau story, which is interesting in itself. It lies right there, but your research didn't look at René Le Chateau at all, did it? I mean, yours is independent of that story.
Well, I'm not discounting it. It's just that it's been done so many times that I didn't want to repeat what other people have said about it, and that's not what I do in my work. I do my work independently. I don't borrow from other people. So all of my conclusions and work is very unique. And I didn't really want to touch on René Le Chateau because it's been done so many times. And to be honest, I didn't find too many links with René Le Chateau, but I did find one or two. So it might be something for the future to see if that will tie in a little better with what I've written.
Well, that's interesting. What did you find that did connect to René Le Chateau?
Well, one of the things was, not necessarily linked with Ren, but linked with Holy Blood, Holy Grail,
right?
Was the tradition of the Nortoniers. So later on, are we jumping a little bit ahead of ourselves?
Yeah,
here?
we kind of are, and I'll make sure
we'll
we get back to
that
it.
in a minute.
Right. Okay. Let's go. Let's start here. Orange.
Yes. So she was the Orange Princess. So everything about about Mary Magdalene is orange. If you look at any Renaissance paintings of her, she is ginger-haired, and she's wearing her standard uniform of green and orange. The two Marys have uniforms. I don't know if people know this. So Mary the Virgin is always in blue and white because she's the Isis character standing on the crescent moon. And Mary Magdalene is always in green and orange with orange hair because she was a ginger. Jesus was ginger-haired as well. I don't know if people know this. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, it says that the new Messiah will be fair-skinned, ginger-haired with freckles. And of course, Islamic tradition picks up on this as well. Because you've probably seen all of these, remote farmers around Afghanistan and Pakistan and places like that with bright ginger hair and ginger beards. Why do they do that? Well, because Muhammad was supposed to be ginger-haired. But Muhammad actually dyed his hair with henna. And he was dyeing his hair with henna so he would look like the previous Messiah, because he was the new Messiah, the new prophet. And the previous Messiah was Jesus.
That is so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, so Muhammad was trying to be ginger-haired because everyone knew that Jesus was ginger. And I didn't know this was such a big tradition until I went out to Syria. I was somewhere in eastern Syria somewhere. It was over in eastern Turkey on the borders with Syria. And I said to this guy who had ginger hair, because there are quite a few gingers over there, "Oh, you look like Scottish." And his friend laughed and said, No. He looked like Isa. And of course, Isa is the Arabic for Jesus. So there's obviously a great tradition over there that Jesus was ginger-haired. And hence Mary Magdalene was ginger-haired as well, because she was his sister or half-sister.
Now, everybody's commenting about this right now. I'm watching this on Twitter fly by.
Well, that's what it says. And all the pharaohs of Egypt were ginger-haired.
That's my question right there. That's my question. Really?
Well, when they did they did a forensic analysis of Ramesses II because his body was decaying. So they took it to France, and while it was there, they did a forensic analysis of Ramesses II at the police forensic laboratory, and they concluded he was a pale-skinned Caucasian with ginger hair.
I have looked at so many mummies, right, from Egypt, and I swear I'm not making this up. They look like they've got red hair.
Yeah. Well, King David did. King David was said to be ruddy, red. So was Esau. Esau was supposed to be red with red hairs. there is this tradition going through the biblical story and the Pharaonic story that most of these people were redheads. And I tentatively, in one of my books, said, actually, this might be where the red and the white crowns of Egypt came from. One might be for the redheads, and the white crown was for the blonde heads. And this was the division between north and south of Egypt, that one group were ginger and one were blonde. Because a lot of these famous characters, of course, were said to be blonde. Was it?
Well, let me jump in here real quick, Ralph. Do you think that they were specifically the pharaohs of Egypt? Do you think if they weren't redheads that they were dyeing their hair to look royal?
I don't think so, because if you remember my book, Scota, Egyptian Queen of the Scots, that says that the Amarna dynasty of Ai and Ankhesenamun were exiled from Egypt. This is the story according to Scotichronicon, which is the Scottish Chronicles. And they went on a big exodus with about 600 people or more, initially to Spain and then to Ireland and Scotland. And what is the dominant hair color of Scotland and Scandinavia? It's the redheads.
Yeah, we don't need to discuss that as a fact. So that now, and
So,
Twitter's lighting up with this right now. Gingers rule, right? And
Gingers rule, yes.
But it kind of makes a lot of sense here.
It does. I'm just saying things the other way round because, quite a lot of these times they've saying, the redheads came down from Scandinavia. And of course, we know the Vikings were quite very good sailors, and they went around, they took Sicily, they controlled Sicily for a while, and they were in Constantinople. But I'm saying, hold on, they probably went the other way first, because we're talking 1320 BC. We're talking a long, long time ago here.
Right.
And they had sufficient time from 1320 BC to be in Scotland and Scandinavia and then grow into those populations that populated those regions.
It's unbelievable. It's funny to watch Twitter light up like it is right now.
Yeah. Well, they did say this in the genetic research they did recently, didn't they? They said that most Western European men carry the same gene as King Tutankhamun, and that would tie in as well, because I'm saying the Amarna regime, and of course Tutankhamun was an Amarna king, ended up going on this great exodus around to Ireland and Scotland.
Somebody just tweeted Cleopatra the seventh, the last Cleopatra, the real one,
yes,
was also a ginger. Is there anything to that?
Yeah, well, I've not come across any definitive evidence that is so. I did hear that as well. But it's interesting that I say that Jesus was actually descended from Cleopatra.
That's right. Wow. Okay.
And so he would have been ginger from her being ginger. So it would be interesting if anyone has any more definitive information on that, because I've not included that in my story yet. But that would be interesting.
Yeah, that would be. And it's so funny. We just spent 20 minutes talking about gingers in this story, but you've always have a way of making me speechless. And this I did not expect this tonight. This is very interesting, and I think that you've sent everybody down a rabbit hole here, and we're going to continue.
Everyone will be looking for more and more information on the gingers. Yes.
Yeah, I find that very interesting, and certainly you're right about Europe and Scotland, and all of the. Okay, all right, back to orange. Let's get back to orange.
Back to orange, yes.
Okay,
yes.
So back to orange.
Yeah, start me off.
Well, that's her name, Princess of Orange. And so how did she acquire this?
Well, she came into the south of France, into Provence, just south of Arles, at Marie-Saint-Lamar. Now, as you run up the Rhone, which is the big river, navigable all the way up, the first town you come to is Arles. which was a big metropolis at that stage, Roman metropolis. The next city you come across is Orange. So this is a real city, the city of Orange, which was named after oranges. That's the symbol of the city, is the oranges. And they say it was called Orange because it means, I don't know, something to do with water in Celtic or something. And I'm saying, hold on a minute. Its name is Orange. Its symbol is orange. And now we have this family that is connected with orange coming up to this area. Now, they were known for oranges because the family name was Aurania, which means heaven, but it means gold as well. So or means gold in Latin and in Greek, I think. And so we get this connection with heaven and gold. And what is gold and in the heavens and circular? The sun.
Right.
And these were sun gods, of course. Jesus was Helios. If you look at the Hamat-Tiveria zodiac, Jesus is the Helios character. He is the sun. He is the golden orb. He is the orange. And so there's this huge connection between the golden family and the heavenly family because the sun is in the heavens. And I think this is why this town was called Orange, because it was named after Aurania. And listeners might think, doesn't sound exactly the same to me. But of course, if you say orange in Dutch, it is Aurania. And gold is that their name was Aurania. And you might say, hold on, why are we translating this into Dutch of all the languages? Why Dutch? Well, because the Dutch people came from the city of Orange in the south of France.
And now we even might be getting ahead of ourselves here with that statement. We're gonna
yes,
land there.
We are. Let's go back to William. Let's go back to
William. And what's interesting also is Orange isn't but 50 miles, 40 miles from the coast. Right up the Rhone. It's right there in the south of France, and it is right on the Rhone. Well, 2-3 miles off of the river, but it is right there in the south of France. It doesn't get any more south than Orange.
Yes. It's as I said in my book, it's probably the city that was opening up to new immigrants. Obviously, this family were new immigrants coming into Arles. It was a big established city. There was probably no room for them in Arles. But Orange at that time, we know, was opening up because there's this huge, great plaque that they found in Orange, which was a map of the entire region and all of the land being parceled out to new immigrants coming into the Orange area. So it was ideal, fertile land for new immigrants to come establish themselves with a large farm or whatever, and re-establish themselves in that region. So I think they probably went up to Orange, and there's a tradition, of course, that Martha went up to the next city, and the next city is Tarascon. And she is known for, within the mythology there, for being resident at Tarascon, which is the next city up. And there she had this wonderful beast called the Tarrasque, which looks like a big tortoise. But actually, I didn't discover this first time, but for the second edition or third edition of the book, I suddenly realized that the Tarrasque is a glyptodon. If you look at all the old dinosaurs, that they've discovered, if you look at a glyptogon, no, I'll say that again. Glyptodon. If you look at one of the shells of a glyptodon, it's exactly the same as a Tarrasque from Tarascon. So I think someone at some point in history found one of these huge, great shells and wondered what it was, and made it into the great beast of Tarascon.
So, back to William. Okay.
Back to William.
Yeah,
yes.
Back to William.
Yeah, William of Orange. So we have this character. Orange was a separate city-state. And this is another thing that's strange about Orange. The city of Orange wasn't just a city. It was a city-state. It was independent. It was never a part of France, right from the first William of Orange right up until the last. And so we're talking now 8th century. We have a William of Orange, and his name was Guillaume, because William is a German variation on that name. His name was Guillaume de Boulogne, or Guillaume Cornet, or Guillaume de Orange, because his city was Orange. And we know them today as the Williams of Orange. And his name is the name that's linked to the Northerners again, because Guillaume in the old French means guide and what did I say it was? Guide and leader. And so effectively he's another Northerner, another ship's captain, a navigator, a guide. So he's not only a guide for the people of Orange, he is symbolizing himself as the guide who sailed the bark of Ra across the seas in the sky. So the heavens were seas, and the bark of Ra, the great ark of Ra, was sailed across those seas by a navigator. And that was an incredibly important position, of course. And so within the royalty, you get this constant references to navigators. And so they're not navigating just the people of the city and the state, but also the gods themselves. They are the link between the gods and men. And that's where his name came from. So when you hear the name William, it means the guide and the navigator. And so these Williams of Orange, well, he was very important, actually, because he was the guy who kicked the Muslims out of France, because there had been a Muslim invasion of Spain way back in the 7th century, 8th century. And the Muslims then invaded France, and they were stopped in France by Charles Martel the first time at the great battle they had there.
I don't want to gloss over the fact that they were a city-state, and the Muslims getting ejected and what was going on with religion with the rest of Europe at that time. This is a big deal, and it's a very important point. And so when you say that they were a city-state, why was it so important with what was going on with the rest of religion? I guess that's the question. I don't want this to get away from us.
Yeah, it's very interesting that it was a separate city-state. It maintained itself as a separate city-state for 800 years, perhaps longer, because we don't know how long before the 8th century it was a separate city-state. It was always completely independent, and always they said it was a Jewish state. It wasn't just any old city-state. It was a Jewish city-state, a Nazarene Jewish city-state, which again links up, of course, with the history of Jesus. But as I was saying, we had this Muslim invasion, and they marched all the way up through France, and they were pushed out again by Charles Martel at the Battle of Tours. But they came back in again at the late 8th century, and it was William of Orange that organized the resistance against them. So he was the king, as it were, the prince of a separate city-state, and he went to the king of the Franks, who was Louis I, and he organized and paid for the Frankish army to be assembled. And then the Frankish army ran away, and he had to grab them back again and lead the whole army, because they didn't want to go into battle. But finally, they had this big battle, and again they pushed the Muslim army back out of France down into Spain. And this is interesting because, again, we get this connection between two completely different books, which suddenly all link together again. Because later on, when I did my Grail Cypher story, I suddenly found that the same story is in Arthurian history. But in Arthurian history, just to be really obtuse, they say that the African army, the Muslim army, was in Ireland attacking Britain. So there was an African army of 160,000 people in Ireland attacking Britain. But of course, that is not the story they were telling. They were actually telling the story of a 160,000 Muslim army coming into France and being repulsed by William of Orange. And we know that this is the same story because the leaders of this army were called Gormund and Isambard.
I'm going to jump in right there. We're going to take a break. And the last tweet that just came in said, he has to continue this direction, Jimmy. This is where he left off in the last interview. See, people are paying attention. Thank you so much, Ralph. This is Fade to Black. I'm yours, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Ralph Ellis, and we're discussing his book, Mary Magdalene, Princess of Orange. More with Ralph right after this short break. Stay with us, everybody.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church.
You're listening to Fade to Black.
Always on the edge of the hottest alternative talk. Jimmy Church with Fade to Black. KGRARadio.com.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
You get a Zipa. You get a Zipa, you hear me?
What's the name when you snort? It's Zipa, Zipa. It's the thing we're craving for. It's Zipa, Zipa. You can't sleep all night. Zipa, Zipa. And wake up feeling right. It's Zipa, Zipa. Makes me love my husband more, 'cause he no longer snores. Zipa, Zipa, it's Zipa, Zipa.
Zipa's different than any other device because it actually works. A lot of these other devices, they just bring the jaw forward. That's it. However, the thing that makes Zipa different, it stabilizes the tongue, basically, with this elastic band. But right here, Jimmy's telling you that this is a unique device. Go to Zipa now, buy it, and stop the snoring. Get a Zipa, ZYPPAH.com. Zipa.com. That's ZYPPAH.com.
Oh, fall. My favorite time of year. Cooler temperatures and, well, let's be honest, layers. Lots and lots of layers. Look, I get it. We all have that favorite hoodie. Matter of fact, I've got a few favorite hoodies. You should wear yours. Enjoy it. I do. But I stay focused on my health year-round. And for me, I take Nature's Youth RSF from nature'syouth.com. Nature's Youth RSF from nature'syouth.com. I eat right, control my portion sizes, still maintain a commitment to regular fitness, and I get plenty of rest, and I take Nature's Youth RSF. It's okay to cover up your beach body for a few months, but don't just forget about it. Nature's Youth understands exactly what it means to provide top-quality health products, and Nature's Youth customers not only improve their health, they know they're also providing their body with the right nourishment to maintain peak performance levels and fight the aging process. So layer up and get started today with Nature's Youth RSF. nature'syouth.com. Simple to use, even simpler to order. Go to nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com.
You are listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Oi, oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. Ralph Ellis has been researching biblical and Egyptian history for more than 30 years, and tonight we're discussing his book, Mary Magdalene, the Princess of Orange. And Ralph, before we get too much ahead of ourselves, I want to back up for a second and start to or take a look at the bloodlines and what was going on with the bloodlines through this period with Mary. Did she start to do just that?
Yeah, and unfortunately, we have a gap. We have a dark age gap of 300-400 years where we really don't know what's going on. So it's a little bit of a guesstimate, but we have the same traditions from Judea, from Mary Magdalene, the Magdalene of Orange, all coming together within the city of Orange. So there's no direct evidence that her family established themselves in Orange and became the leaders of Orange and became the princes of Orange, because that's what I'm alluding to. However, it's strongly suggestive that that is exactly what happened, because, of course, we were talking about the gingers before. The princes of Orange are all ginger again. Yeah, so we're coming back to the same symbolism as we had before. They are princes of Orange, and they all have orange hair. So it's very suggestive that Mary Magdalene was successful. She did reestablish her line with her daughters in the south of France, and Martha as well, because she was up at the next town at Tarascon. And they became influential because they probably still had a lot of influence at that time. They had a lot of money still, perhaps from well-wishers and friends and whatever. I doubt if they had lost all of their money, because you've got to remember that Edessa, which is their home city, that their two home cities were not Jerusalem, but their home cities were Edessa and Palmyra. Now, those two cities were still intact. And they were still very wealthy. Palmyra was the wealthiest city in the whole of the Roman Empire, pretty much.
That's right.
They could have been sending out money to the exiles who were not allowed, obviously, back to Syria. I mean, the Romans were never going to allow that. But they could have been sending assistance out towards Orange. And we know that Jesus never got back to Palmyra, because I say he was the king of Palmyra and Edessa as well, of course. But Palmyra in AD 71 was forced to elect or choose another king. And we know this from the history of Arthurian legend that says this in AD 71. Well, that is just after the Jewish revolt, and they were having to choose a new king because Jesus was sent away in exile and he wasn't coming back. So there's a lot of circumstantial evidence to say that, there is a direct link here between Mary Magdalene and the princes of Orange that established themselves in this independent city that was independent of the whole of France, and it was acknowledged for being of Judaic origins, because William of Orange was also known. He had several epithets, and one of them was William de Courtenay, which means William the Hook Nose. And I think we all know what that refers to.
William the Hook Nose.
William the Hook Nose, yeah.
Yes.
And when they had the battle with the Muslims and actually threw them out of France, it was financed by the Jews of Nimes. Nantes or Nimes? Nimes, I think. And that's what it says in the history of this region. So the army was Orange and the army was Frank, but it was paid for by the Jews of Nimes. And Nantes as well, I think.
So that's what's going to pop up in Twitter now. Oh, great. Now I'm a ginger and Jewish, and I didn't know this before
there's
tonight.
Quite a few of them. If you go over to Israel, you'll see there's quite a few ginger Jews. I mean, they do stand out because obviously most Jews are black-haired, but you do do get, the sort of 3-4% of Jews that have the traditional outfits, and they're 100% fully ginger, as ginger as any Scot. And of course, Jesus was a Jew, and of course, he was a Nazarene Jew, and he was ginger according to all the traditions that I've looked at. He was a gingerhead Jew as well, although he was a Nazarene, so therefore he was Egyptian. So he was an Egypto Jew.
Here we go. I can already.
Yeah.
We're going to start trending ginger Jew on Twitter tonight.
It's going to be. We're going to start a new cult of the ginger Jew.
Yeah. Somebody just tweeted. Oh, there you go. That's why we've got Woody Allen. Okay, everybody.
Yeah. Well, that's right. He was a ginger as well, wasn't he?
Yeah. Let's everybody relax. But yeah, this is a very interesting point. And what about William? We can go with any one of them. William 1, 2, or 3, right? Of Orange.
Yeah.
Did any of them make any claims to the royal bloodline or the bloodline of Jesus or Mary?
Yes, they did in a way, because this is all linked up. And again, this is where the two books suddenly linked themselves together, even though they were written 6 years apart. Because, I was talking about Gormund and Isambard.
Right.
They were the leaders of the African army in Ireland attacking Britain. Well, one of the books about William of Orange is called Gormund and Isambard. And that's how we know that this is actually a story about the Muslim invasion of France. And the other link we get is the chief historian of Arthurian history is Wolfram von Eschenbach. And yet the full history of William of Orange was written by Wolfram von Eschenbach. He wrote both of these books. And so they are intimately linked. The story and history of King Arthur is intimately linked with William of Orange because the same author wrote both of their histories.
That's right.
And I've already said, and we're going to probably go through that because we're doing this show, as you said, on Coast to Coast on Saturday night.
Right.
We've already, what was I going to say about this? We've already said in the Arthurian books that I identified the Arthur character with the Jesus character. Well, now the same author, Wolfram von Eschenbach, is linking the William of Orange character also with the Jesus character. So there is a direct link there, and there's also a direct link through there's a mythical history of the family of William of Orange that has these sort of Jesus type overtones, where his father was a cobbler as opposed to a carpenter and all this sort of business. And there's various links they put into his family history, which are obviously sort of gospel type stories. So yes, there was a big mythology, which could not be said openly, of course, that he was linked to the family of Jesus.
Yeah, and
Jesus was supposed to be a celibate.
There's that, and also and I would think modern pop culture looks at all of those original Arthurian legends as being British, and they are not. They were translated.
Yes. Yeah. Well, they were all Norman French, actually, so they weren't British. And it's a long story, and I think we've been through this once before, and we're going to do it again on Saturday night. So anyone who's interested in this, listen into Coast to Coast, because we're going to go through all of this in some detail. But the story only arrives, the Arthurian story only arrives when the Knights Templar come back from the Near East. And it's my contention that they brought back from the Near East a sort of new gospel, a historical gospel about what happened in those times. And they could not tell this story because it was heretical. So they thought, well, what can we do with it? And yes, we can call this Jesus type character, we can call him Arthur instead. And nobody can persecute us for having a mythical story about an Arthur. They could if we said that Jesus was still alive in AD 70 and he was a king and he was married to Mary Magdalene and all that sort of stuff. You could be persecuted for that, but if you change his name to Arthur, then, well, you're home and dry, aren't you? And that's what I think happened for the Arthurian story. And in some senses, that's what's happened with the William of Orange story, except for the fact that we know William of Orange is a real character because we have his history. And we also have his monastery. If anyone is down in the south of France, they should visit his place at, what's it called? I'll remember it in a minute. I'll look it up on my PDF while we're talking. And he founded this wonderful monastery in the south of France, which is a wonderful place to go and visit.
Now, what about the monarchies and things that started to get established throughout Europe and Northern Europe and their direct connections back to, we started to talk about this at the beginning of the show, but their direct connections back to Orange, the south of France, and of course, Mary.
Yes. And just for 5 seconds, I found the name of this place. It's called Saint-Guilhem-le-Desert in Gaillon in Provence. Wonderful monastery that he built there. What happens to this this royal family, princely family? Well, they get caught up in the Reformation. Do we have time to go through the Reformation just 5 minutes?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, just for 5 minutes, let's quickly look at the Reformation, because this is where this book comes into the modern era and why it's all important to the modern era. Because what I'm saying is that Mary Magdalene founded this Princes of Orange, and they founded the Reformation, and they founded the Industrial Revolution. So everything you see around you is due to William of Orange and Mary Magdalene. Far-reaching claim, I know, but let's sort of go through it a little bit. So the Reformation started. The Reformation was the big complaint about the Catholic Church, about the dominance and the oppression and tyranny of the Catholic Church. And it started with Martin Luther in 1517 when he stuck his 95 Theses on the door of Wittenberg Church. So this is 1517. So we'll run through this very quickly because you don't need to know it all. The Reformation then ran through, it was a long battle. It really was a long battle. It ran through Henry VIII in the early 1500s, Elizabeth I in the late 1500s, Oliver Cromwell, of course. They always say, if you read this history, it was royalists against parliamentarians. No, it wasn't. It was Catholics against Protestants. That was the whole basis of this big English civil war that we had. Then it runs through the Jameses and Charleses, and then we come to William of Orange, who is an English king, but he's Dutch. So we invited a Dutch king to become the King of England. And why was the Dutch king called the Prince of Orange? Well, because Orange, as we said before, was a separate principality within France. It was a separate city-state, but it was Protestant. It was one of the first Protestants. It was Protestant, and it was Huguenot. Yeah, I was trying to think of the name there for a minute. It was a Huguenot Protestant city, and they were being persecuted, of course, in France by the Catholics, and so all of these Huguenots were coming back to Britain and various other Protestant regions because they were being persecuted in Orange. And as a part of that movement, the Princes of Orange established themselves in Holland. So they set up a new principality, which we now know as the Netherlands, the Low Countries. And so one of those kings was, well, then they weren't allowed to call themselves kings because they weren't powerful enough to be called a king. So that's why they called themselves the Princes of Orange. And one of those Princes of Orange was invited to Britain because he was Protestant and became the King of England. And that was William III. And that almost represented the end of the Reformation, when the Protestant north of Europe beat the Catholic south of Europe effectively, and that was almost the end of the Reformation. But it wasn't quite the end, because William of Orange died. When did he die? He died in 1702. And this battle with the Catholics had been against Louis XIV. And Louis XIV wasn't able to do anything because Orange was in France in his own backyard, and he wasn't allowed to do anything with it because William of Orange was so powerful. But when William of Orange died, Louis XIV took advantage of that, and he destroyed Orange. So he destroyed the whole city, exiled everybody, and killed everybody.
And you know what I find interesting here in this tie-in, and it's not much of a reach, but Prince Bernhard, of Denmark, was one of the co-founders of the Bilderberg Group, and I believe this is fact, Ralph, that he claimed a direct bloodline all the way back to King David.
Okay, right. No, I've not heard of that one. So, yes, that's another interesting line going back in the same direction.
Yeah, to King David. David.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
who was also a redhead.
Right.
That's what it says.
Yes,
It says in the Tanakh, it says he was a redhead. Yeah. Interesting. I'll have to have a look at that. I've not seen that one before.
Yeah. And what's really funny, when you look at his family tree and his bloodline, how he ties this in, his name was Prince Bernhard Leopold Frederick Everhard Julius, on and on and on. And I think he had like 10 names in his name. But a direct bloodline back to King David. And here he is, in Denmark. So anyway, just a little
of
passing
course,
piece.
Jesus was of the line of David, exactly the same.
And that's
so Mary Magdalene would have been of the line of David, exactly the same. And if the princes of Orange were descended from that family, then they would have been of the line of David as well.
I'm just saying. I'm just throwing it out there.
Throwing that in.
Right. And the whole tie-in, right, to Bilderbergs. And, why not make him a Mason, too, as well? But then again, you would know that.
Because Jesus was a Mason, of course. Have we been through that?
Yeah, you know what? You and I talked about that, I think, off air. I don't think we've ever talked about that on air. But
have we not?
No, and one of the, you know what? Let's actually address that really quick.
Let's go through that, very quickly, because Jesus was called a tekton. He wasn't called a carpenter, and a tekton is the basis of our name, architect. Architecton.
And
it's
you
Greek.
just said something key there, Ralph. You said our. Okay, so let's clear that up too as well. Okay. You are a Freemason.
Yeah, well, yes, I am. Yes.
It's okay. You don't have to feel guilt. You don't have to feel guilt. So, but the reason why that's important is because you know what you're talking about. And that's when you make these, you're not doing research into this from the outside. You are a Freemason. And so
do it from the side as well.
Now, you have also said, and let's stay right here, that pretty much were all of his disciples Masons too as well?
Yes, effectively, this would have been a Masonic society. So he was a Freemason. He was a architecton, which means master mason. That's why he was the cornerstone. That's why the primary disciple was Simon, and he was given the title Peter Kephas, which means stone, stone. And all of the symbolism that they have is based on Masonic type symbolism. So for many reasons, and I go through quite a lot of this sort of history, it's quite obvious that Jesus was the Grand Master of the Judean Lodge.
Is that why they downplayed the Freemason side of Jesus and made him, how do I want to say this, made him a carpenter instead of somebody that worked with stone? Am I reaching a little bit too far here, or am I on target?
No, except that there is another reason for doing that as well. They didn't want people to know he was a real king. So you have this dichotomy all the way through the Gospels, in that he's called a king on 36 occasions. But then they say, oh, no, he's not a king really, he's a carpenter. And then it says he's the king of the Jews. Oh, yes, but he was only, that was only a title. He wasn't a real king. And so they're never quite sure what to actually call him, because they don't want to admit that he was a powerful king, because that doesn't go with the story that they've made. And so they have to downplay it and say he was just a carpenter, when it doesn't mean carpenter at all. In modern Greek, if you look up tekton in modern Greek, it says Freemason. So yeah, it's quite obvious that that Jesus was a Mason. And oh yes, of course the best evidence, I suppose, is the raising of Lazarus. I mean, if you go through the raising of Lazarus in the Gospel of John, it is a third degree raising. It's exactly what you do during the third degree. So it's quite obvious to anyone that's been through the third degree what they were doing at that time. And Jesus was officiating. He is the one who raised Lazarus from the dead, and therefore he was the master mason.
Okay, well, okay. Let me ask you this. So you're hanging out at the lodge, right?
Yeah,
you're hanging out at the lodge. Is this common knowledge amongst the Freemasons? I mean, you guys kick back. I know that you accept all religions. That's not the point. But what I am asking is, do you guys like sit around and go, yeah, of course, man. Well, we got Jesus on our side. He was a Mason. Is this something that you guys talk about? Is this
surprisingly not. I've been surprisingly baffled by the lack of knowledge of many Masons, even senior Masons, who have been through the chair at Grand Lodge in London and still don't know most of this history. And I, as a beginner, because I'm not terribly high within Masonry, I'm invited to actually give lectures on Masonic history. So, there is large chunks of Masonic history have gone missing, as they've gone missing in many departments, in many religions and many spheres of life. Large amounts of data and information has gone missing. And I think a lot of this simply doesn't exist.
If I was at the lodge, right, I'm hanging out with you guys, and I bring this up, I'm not going to surprise anybody in the room.
I think you would, actually. I think you would surprise a lot of people, because a lot of people don't know. They can't compare Masonry with biblical history because they don't know the biblical history, because it's not even taught. They might have known this more within the Victorian era, because people went to church and they learnt the Bible, and therefore they would know the stories, Old Testament and New Testament. But nowadays people don't. They don't know the stories at all. They don't even know the links with the Old Testament Hiram. We had those two authors who are Masons, if you remember, that wrote the Hiram key, and they said Hiram Abiff is not mentioned in the Bible. And you've got to think, hold on. They're supposed to be two Masons, and they don't know that Hiram is in the Old Testament. When, of course, he's one of the main characters within Kings and Chronicles, and they don't seem to know that. Well, I don't know.
Well, it's always made sense to me when you look at, and I'm serious about this, when you look at ancient Egypt, right, the Old Kingdom, and you start there in the dynastic period. And you look at what's going on there, that is obviously, that's Masons. That's the start of everything. And, probably predated that too as well. You can go back a couple of thousand years, but I've always thought that. And they had 2,000 years before, 0 or 30 or 60 AD to well establish themselves. And I don't think I'm reaching here in suggesting this.
No. As Josephus Flavius said, he said that the Jews were the last of the pyramid builders. So yeah, there's a big tradition that goes way back into Egypt, and of course Masonic history goes back into the Temple of Solomon. that's what it's based around. It's based around the Old Testament. It's based around the building of the Temple of Solomon. But this is one area where there is a tradition where people know this story. There is a story within many Masonic lodges, because not all lodges are the same, of course, that the original temple was not the Temple of Solomon. The original temple of the Masons was the Great Pyramid.
And hence all of the Egyptian symbology, which is just everywhere. Let's take a break right here. When we come back, Ralph, let's take some phone calls. We haven't done that in a while. So, let's do that tonight. Ralph Ellis, 323-825-5045. And if we didn't open up a few doors for questions tonight, we never will. 323-825-5045 to speak with the one and only Ralph Ellis. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. This is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
KGRA Radio. Intelligent talk.
You've probably heard about all the great benefits of goat milk soap, but did you know some companies take shortcuts? At Old New England Soap, we make our organic goat's milk soap using 36% goat's milk. That's 17% more than most others. Our bars are larger, so they last longer, producing lots of lather packed with vitamins. And our soap is a natural moisturizer that smooths dry and damaged skin. Order online at oldnesoap.com. That's oldnesoap.com. You've tried the rest. Now try the best. oldnesoap.com.
Water-based soaps on supermarket shelves use harsh chemical acids to break down dead skin cells. And that's just not good for you. At Old New England Soap, our soaps are made without chemical ingredients, contain no alcohol or petroleum products, and use 85% organic materials and carry the USDA's organic certification. Try some today. Go to oldnesoap.com. That's oldnesoap.com. oldnesoap.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on the smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
If you have sciatica, then you know all about the crippling pain that travels from your lower back down your leg when a spasm occurs. It's brutal. In fact, it's enough to take your breath away. Dr. Zhang's Sciatica Nerve Cream helps relieve persistent, shooting pains associated with the sciatic nerve in the lower back and legs. This natural, homeopathic cream contains the most potent ingredients to soothe even the most excruciating pain associated with sciatica. Stop the pain now. Ask for Dr. Zhang's Sciatica Nerve Cream at your local health food store or go online to trasknutrition.com.
Would you like relief from muscle pain, headaches, and discomfort to sleep better, have more energy during the day, and just feel naturally amazing? Fibromalic can help. Its blend of malic acid and magnesium can provide pain relief and comfort for those who experience fibromyalgia. It helps your body absorb more oxygen, and it works quickly for a significant reduction in pain within 48 hours, all without a prescription. Ask for Fibromalic at health and vitamin shops or shop fibromalic.com.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of Fade to Black by just calling 605-562-4482. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Just call 605-562-4482. You can listen to me, Jimmy Church, on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Go Beckley Tappy.
You want to know a secret? I love ponies. I really love ponies. I'm serious. I couldn't stay sane without ponies to brush.
Why Fade to Black? Because you never got that pony, damn it.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
Welcome back. Ralph Ellis tonight. He has been researching biblical and Egyptian history for more than 30 years, and he's independent. That's why he gets it done. He's our guest tonight. We're discussing Mary Magdalene, the Princess of Orange, his book. And now what I wanted to do, I want to kind of stay focused on this industrial revolution aspect of things and what was going on in Holland throughout this period, because I think it's important to establish how and why this happened and where it happened from, and its significance on us today.
Yeah, because as we were discussing before, this was a part of the Reformation process, which gave us the Enlightenment. And this was a very important battle that we fought, the Northern Europe, and that would include sort of all of the Americas eventually. This battle between the Protestant side and the Catholics, because the Catholic Church had stamped its foot on science and not allowed any freedom of thought, any innovation. Everything was stifled. And so we have all of these characters from history being oppressed and burnt. People like, Bruno, one of the original Gnostics and scientists, was burnt at the stake at 1600. The problems that Galileo had and so on. Science could not advance under the Catholic Church. And hence we had this Reformation and this age of enlightenment that was established at the beginning of the 17th century. And suddenly, when the Protestant Church had won the Reformation, suddenly we had this blossoming of research and development and ideas, and the Royal Society was founded, which is Britain's premier scientific institution. Grand Lodge was established. Significantly, they established it exactly 200 years after Martin Luther had pinned his theses to the doors of Wittenberg Church. So it shows you what they were celebrating and what side they were on. And suddenly, with all of this new research that was going on at the Royal Society and other places now within Europe, suddenly we had the Industrial Revolution. And that could not have happened under the previous Catholic regime. And so, as I said before, everything that you see around you, everything that has been developed on the back of the Industrial Revolution would not be here had it not been for this Reformation. And of course, the key player in this Reformation was William of Orange, the King of Holland, who was the king or previous Prince of Orange in the south of France. And of course, he was another redhead, as we said before. They're all gingers. And they led the Reformation process. And so it seems to me that the Church of Jesus was Jewish. Yes, we know Jesus was a Jew, but it was Gnostic. Jesus was never an Orthodox type Jew, because he was actually having a battle with the Orthodox Jews. He was a Gnostic. He was an Egyptian. He was a Magi. He was part Persian as well, because his family had been in Persia. We talked about that before.
Right.
And as a Gnostic, if we translated Gnosticism into Latin, we get scientia. And if we translate scientia into English, we get science. And so the Gnostics were the sort of pre-scientists. They were people who were more than happy to investigate God's world, because, well, God had created this world, so why can't we investigate it? Why would a God be unhappy with us looking at his creation and saying, well, how does that work?
Thinking.
Let's go and investigate.
Right. Yeah.
Thinking.
Yeah.
Independence.
Right.
And that's what the Gnostics were all about. Okay, they got a lot of things wrong because they didn't have the understanding we had, but they still had very good understanding. I think we've been through this before. The zodiac on the Sea of Galilee at Hamet Tavira, because the Nazarenes celebrated the zodiac. It was the central symbol of the Nazarene Church was the zodiac, from which we get, the 12 disciples and all that business. The zodiac at Hamet Tavira has the Jesus character in the center, who's Helios, the sun.
Right.
And Helios, the sun, is holding a blue-green spherical earth in his gravitational grasp. And this is a first century mosaic. So within that mosaic is a very simple, very beautiful actually mosaic, very simple. But the symbolism is the sun holding the earth in its gravitational grasp, so they know the heliocentric model of the solar system already, long before Galileo, long before Copernicus, long before anyone else. And they know that the earth is a sphere that looks blue and green when you see it from afar. So they did know quite a lot, the Nazarene Gnostics. This was the level of the knowledge that they had. And they were progressing in that sort of direction, in Renaissance, Industrial Revolution direction within the first century, because they had characters like Hero of Alexandria, who was the Leonardo da Vinci of the first century. But of course, he was 1600 years before Leonardo, and he was doing the same sort of thing with his great inventions. He invented
steam,
what did he invent?
Robots.
He had a steam engine, didn't he?
Right,
And he
right,
had slot machines, and he had a fire engine he made, and he made these trick jugs for turning water into wine, and singing birds, and automatic doors, and all these sort of things. These were all first century inventions.
Are you suggesting that that Jesus was a magician too as well? Did he learn that the water into wine thing necessarily wasn't divine? It was a trick.
It was definitely a trick, as Alexander, what's his name, Hero of Alexandria says, of his trick jug, which was operated by air pressure and water tension. It's quite actually very clever. He says, we can pour out water for some and wine for others who we wish to jest with. So it was a jest. It was.
I got to tell you, every time you're on this show, I'm expecting a lightning bolt to take out the bunker. Yes. A little bzzz, what was that? And there's a little steaming piece of coal in my chair where I used to be.
Yeah, these people were the David Blaines of the era, or what's that other guy that runs around now? Dynamo. They were the dynamos of this era. They had these marvelous tricks that they could show to people. And I'm sure even today, people are amazed by what dynamo can do. You imagine taking that back to the first century.
Could you?
And dynamo doing some of his tricks to the crowd,
So one fish, two fish makes it's a whole nother meaning then. Okay, wait a minute. That's a bad joke. That's a bad joke.
But there was a bit of symbolism in there as well, because that's referring to Pisces.
Now, I think the other important thing here to address is the Vatican is sitting over there in Rome watching all of this, right? All of this start to pan out. Not only going back to 1000 AD, like that. I'm talking about all the way through to today. They're watching this thing develop out of Orange and through into Holland, possibly over into Great Britain, and the influence of what is going on here and the possibility of a bloodline. And they weren't addressing all of it, or were they? And what do they have to say about this?
Well, that's why they had the opposition. That's why we had this Reformation battle between the Protestants and the Catholics, because they don't like this information coming out. That's why they destroyed the Templars back in 1307.
Right.
Because the Templars had the same information. The Templars had created Arthurian history, which is based upon this heretical history of Jesus. And yes, the Princes of Orange, they would have known, I'm sure, that the Princes of Orange were probably descended from the bloodline of Jesus. And so they were fighting the Princes of Orange during the Reformation era for very much the same reasons as they were fighting the Templars. So this battle has been ongoing for 2,000 years for dominance within the two churches, because remember, the Church of Jesus has nothing to do with Christianity. The Church of Jesus was Gnostic, it was Nazarene, it was Ebionite, it was Egypto-Jewish, it was nothing to do with standard Judaism, and it was certainly nothing to do with simple Judaism, which became Christianity. Simple Judaism was created by Saul, St. Paul. Totally different church. It was the church for the Gentiles. Nothing to do with the Church of Jesus whatsoever. And it became the enemy of the Church of Jesus. So anyone who is believing in Christianity is believing the religion created by the enemy of Jesus. They are doing quite the reverse of everything that Jesus said. As Jesus said in Matthew 6:6, I think it is, do not go to church. People go to church to be seen by men, not to be seen by God.
What?
And then, of course, that's what it says, Matthew 6:6. Look it up.
Yeah, and today, see, this is the thing. I know that we have somebody from the Catholic Church that is listening to this show right now. Maybe somebody,
I'm sure.
right? Maybe even somebody on an official sense. Maybe,
possibly.
And they have also read your books, and they're listening to this show because they know who you are. Have you ever had a response from the church coming back to you, talking about your book, either good or bad? I would think so.
Not from the church in any official capacity. I've had individuals being very upset with me from the Catholic side. I've had Protestants being very supportive, surprisingly, from the Protestant side. And I've had various death threats from the Muslim side, but that's par for the course, I think, nowadays.
Right.
But yes, nothing directly from anyone with any influence, not even any newspapers, Catholic newspapers or anything of that nature. They are keeping a stony silence because they probably don't want to give, what do they call it, the oxygen of promotion, whatever they call it. To actually talk about it will give me more time, more airwave time than I already have. So there's probably no point them actually discussing it.
Yeah, reacting to it would validate it, and
yes,
that's interesting.
Yeah, so they want to steer clear of it. So I've had nothing from the Catholic side in any sort of vaguely official capacity, but I've had quite a lot of Protestant ministers sort of writing in and say, well, yes, actually that clarifies, a few things I didn't know before, because you probably don't get this in America so much, but our Protestant church is bordering on the atheist, as it were. They did a survey some time ago of Protestant vicars and priests, and there was something like 20% of Protestant priests did not believe in Jesus, which shows you how far our church has drifted from the mainstream of the Catholic Church. So it's a very liberal, very tolerant, very Gnostic sort of religion, our Protestant church, which the Catholic Church has never become. So they are very, very different.
And what about today when we talk about the ruling families? We could say in Northern Europe, but throughout the world, and the possibility of those bloodlines being there, and that's why they are in power. And somebody knows about these bloodlines, and that they know possibly, some powerful information that keeps them in power. Is there any indication of that going on today? We all know the conspiracy theories.
Yes, there's lots of those. Whether they still know this within those families, I don't know. I think they must have done within the Reformation period because they were so closely involved with it and so dedicated and taking so many risks in order to prosecute that particular war and revolution, as it were. The personal risks were that great that you would have thought they must have had some extra motivation to continue with it. Nowadays, you don't see that sort of same commitment. Whether one or two courtiers know more about it than the actual princes themselves, I don't know. You got to look at people like Charlie Boy sometimes and think, what does he know? Not a great deal. But that doesn't mean that some of his more senior courtiers don't know more than he actually knows himself. And they're sort of not exactly manipulating, but keeping the history behind the scenes. It would be interesting to know, but I've not come across anyone important enough to establish whether any of that might be true or not. The closest I've got to it is talking to Grand Lodge officers who have been through the chair as Master Mason at Grand Lodge, who didn't seem to know that much about it. And I don't think they were just saying that. They didn't seem to know.
We have two age-old questions in conspiracy circles when it comes to this. You've got to be a 33rd to get to the secret stuff, right?
Yes.
To get to the room behind the secret room, behind the library in the lodge. To get to that room, you got to be 33rd. That everybody, all other Masons up to that point, are just pawns in chess, and they're not exposed to anything. So,
well, that's true. But if you've been through the chair at Grand Lodge, you've got to be pretty high up in the system. And they didn't seem to know a lot of this history, even the history of Egypt. They didn't know very well. Whether that's true of some of the other lodges, like the Bones Club and all that sort of business, or even the Templars up in Scotland, I don't know. I was talking to some Templars because I went to a Templar Lodge meeting, and he was saying, this is, pretty recent, the procedures and symbolism that they're using is all fairly recent stuff. It's not based on ancient Templar history as far as he knew. So I don't know.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So the Templar handshake is... or the Mason handshake is new? Is that is part
of? Yes, because that's what you're told when you actually go for the handshake, that this is the tokens and symbols that have replaced the original ones that were lost.
Oh, that's interesting.
Is what they say. Now, whether that's true or not, well, who knows? But that is what is said to you at the time.
Yeah, the Masons would never ask me to join. It would just never happen. I would love to check it out at least, but there's no way.
I can tell you one of the secrets of Masonry. And this is a genuine secret of Masonry that you can only hear in Lodge. And so anyone that's listening now, where you're getting a freebie here, because you're not allowed to know this apart from in Lodge. And so one of the first secrets of Masonry that you ever find out about in the first degree, if I remember correctly, is that the Earth rotates around the sun.
Yeah. Oh, what do you mean?
Well, the Earth rotates around the sun.
And
that is the secret.
Is there another? Is there Is there?
Well, no, you can see where this is coming from.
Right.
You can see the age of Masonry, how far back this goes.
Right.
Where only 400 years ago that was a heresy.
Right.
You know, if we're talking the time of Galileo and Copernicus, that was still a heresy at that time. And so that's one of the first secrets that you learn, was a heresy from 400 years ago.
You know, you bummed out every flat earther in the world. You just completely just shot it right out. Just done. Just done. I wanted to ask you this really quick. And by the way, we've got a problem with our phone system here tonight, Ralph, and I apologize for that. And I've been sitting here trying to mess with it. Static noise. Anyway. So we only have a few minutes left. If you want to do some overtime, that's fine. But one of the things that is concerning for me, and I know you don't have any connections to any religion, so you don't have a dog in this race, so to speak. But biblical relics, simple little things, biblical relics. Why don't we have any? I mean, is there one official relic? Is there something out there, and why isn't there any?
Because they don't want to know their true history. And this is not a matter of forgetting their history. They don't want to know their history because their history, the real history, does not match with the story they've told. So time and time again, they've retold this story as a story of oppression against us by those horrible Egyptians, by those horrible Romans, by those horrible Jews sometimes as well. Excuse me, when we're talking about the Jesus character.
Right.
And because that plays well with your people. You know, to be oppressed means everyone's against us. Therefore, we've got to stick together, you know, because everyone's against us, which plays very well on a social scene. But that wasn't the truth of the history. In the Old Testament, the Israelites were the Hyksos pharaohs of Egypt. They were the most powerful people in that region. They weren't oppressed at all. If anything, they were oppressing. But they happened to lose a war against the southern Egyptians, and so they ended up on an exodus. Jesus was not a poor carpenter being oppressed by Romans. He fought a war against the Romans, expecting to win and become the next emperor of Rome.
Right.
But he lost.
Right.
And so the story they wrote, and this story was a Roman story written by the Romans for Roman purposes, again cast him as a non-entity, just a lowly carpenter who was, he had some funny ideas, but he was just a carpenter. Why? Because they didn't want anybody to follow him and organize another revolt against Rome. Everything they were doing was trying to stop these revolts against Rome. And so they wanted to calm the revolutionary Nazarene Gnostic Jewish religion by taking that history, which is exactly what they did, and Josephus Flavius did this for them. He was the only Jew left standing after the Jewish revolt. So he took this story and he covered it with fairy dust and presented it as the story of Jesus. And it's the story of the Jewish revolt covered in fairy dust or icing sugar. It's all sweetened up and made very nice. And the Romans were wonderful people. It wasn't the Romans' fault. He washed his hands of blame, for Jesus. And as a good Jew, you must pay your taxes to Rome, render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar.
Right.
It was all written from a Roman perspective for the benefit of Rome. And therefore, if anyone looking back at this history who is a Jew or a Christian and is looking for their history, they're never going to find it because it's been subtly altered to such a degree that even if they did find it, they would not want to see it. Because what they would find is not what they've been taught and not what they believe. Because they can find Jesus. He belongs there. I found him. He's all there. But he's a king. He's a very powerful king. He lived in the AD 60s. and he started a war with Rome, which he lost. And so, as a committed, a pious Christian, you're not going to want that story, even if you find it. And so I'm sure down the ages, various other people have looked at this, found what I've found, and gone, oh, holy crap.
Right.
What am I going to do with this story?
Right.
Right. I'm just going to forget about it.
Right.
I'm just not going to go there. Yeah. And that's what's happened. And the Jews have done exactly the same with King David and King Solomon. And they've done exactly the same with Joseph and Moses and all of the other characters, because they're all there in the historical record. But they don't want to find them, because the character that they will find is not the character they've been brought up with to believe in.
Thank you.
That's the problem they have.
Thank you so much, Ralph. And always a great conversation with you. Go get some rest. You're going to need it because just in a few days you're going to be joining us over at Coast to Coast AM. But until then, have a great, safe week, and we'll see you Saturday night, Sunday morning for you on Coast to Coast.
Thanks
AM.
very much for the show. It was great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ralph. You are the very best. We'll see you in a couple of days. All right, thank you, Ralph. And I'm backwards here tonight. I'm working from left to right. Thank you, Ralph Ellis. His website, everybody, is over at jimmychurchradio.com. You can go click on the link, edfu-books.com. It's right there. Go get, you know what? Start with Jesus, last of the Pharaohs. Start there and then work yourself forward. It's the only way to do it. I did. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. This is Fade to Black. I'm going to try these phones one more time when we come back. Thank you, Ralph Ellis. I'll be right back. Stay right there.
Hey, what up, y'all? It's your girl Vivica Fox here, and you are listening to my boy, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will.
Balance of Nature's fruits and veggies.
I had gout in both my knees, and it's gone.
Well, I'm pretty stupid. I should have ordered it 15 years ago. Best thing I ever got in my... It's the most effective product that I've ever bought in my life.
He had eczema on his hand, and it cracked for years. He did anything from doctor, every cream, everything. And 3 months on the veggies and fruit, it was gone.
They're just awesome. They keep asking me, what am I doing? I told them what I did with my cholesterol. I had the blood test, right? And it went down 100 points. 262, now it's 162. Everything is just perfect.
Call now to find out how to get your free month's supply of Balance of Nature. Call 800-2468-751. That's 800-2468-751. Call now, 800-2468-751. Or go online to balanceofnature.com.
Use promo code TSL.
Would odors, mold, and mildew describe your basement or crawl space? It doesn't have to be that way. Transform them into a fresh, healthy, usable one with the technologically advanced Wave Moisture Control Units. The computerized operation maximizes moisture control and also expels harmful radon, combustion gases, and numerous other pollutants. Dehumidifiers are old technology that do nothing for air quality and waste energy. Wave units are intelligent, self-monitoring, do not need maintenance, and will save you hundreds in electricity. Wave units are still running effectively over 15 years. They've been tested and installed in public and military housing and by property managers nationwide. Buy a unit now, and if your home is not fresher and drier, you can return it for a full refund for up to 12 months. What have you got to lose? Call now. 1-888-618-WAVE. 1-888-618-WAVE. Or visit mydryhome.com. That's mydryhome.com.
Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
What's up, Fadernauts? Studio Dome loves Fade to Black and the F2B audience so much that they have put together the ultimate stereo Bluetooth system. They've done it just for you. Man, check this out. The Studio Dome SBB2 stereo system is here. It's featuring 2 Studio Boombox 2 SBB2 wireless Bluetooth speakers, packed in its own custom hardshell case. This Studio Dome system features the very latest in stereo Bluetooth technology. The two full-range boom boxes are in true wireless stereo. You've got to hear this. It's amazing. It's just $129, and use the promo code JCRTWS, and you'll also get free shipping. It's simple. Just go to jimmychurchradio.com, click on the Studio Dome banner. Go Beckley Teppy.
Erica, Brittany, Gabby, and you're listening to JimmyChurchRadio.com.
It's not a lifestyle we chose. We were born this way. KGRARadio.com.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
Welcome back, Fade to Black. I've been working on these phones during the break. I think I've got it working. But if they ain't, no phones, no show, man. I'll just shut this sucker down right now, man. I think I've got it working. But there you go. All right, I'm doing my best. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me on Twitter, at JChurchRadio. It's very frustrating for me, to be here and trying to work on this. And it's just the show is about phone calls and about open lines. And if I don't have that, I'm not going to just sit here and blab. It's about interacting with all of you. It's very frustrating. In September, an international team of researchers discovered a mysterious ancient city on top of a hill in central Greece. The news broke on this today. Scattered on and around Strongvillavuni Hill on the great Thessalian plains near a village called Vlokos, some 190 miles north of Athens, the ruins had been dismissed as a part of a small, irrelevant settlement. Archaeologists found a town square and a street grid that indicate that they are dealing with quite a large city. The area inside the city wall measures over 40 hectares. Ancient pottery and coins unearthed by the archaeologists helped date the city to at least 2,500 years ago. The oldest finds are from around 500 BC, but the city seems to have flourished mainly from the 4th to 3rd century BC before it was abandoned for some reason, and they don't know why. Maybe in connection with the Roman conquest of the area. Absolutely amazing. And the thing is, it's all underground. It's under dirt, possibly deliberately buried. Isn't that interesting? Well, also today, the United States Department of Energy said it will not comply with the request from President-elect Donald Trump's Energy Department transition team for the names of people who have worked on climate change and the professional society memberships of lab workers. Okay, now it looks like the phones are working. Oh, holy crap. All right, let's, wow. Welcome to Fade to Black. Who's calling?
Hey, Jimmy, it's Brent in Texas. How are you?
Hey, Brent in Texas. So we got it up and running during the break. I'm a little relieved now. Oh, man. So what's on your mind, Brent?
I just listening to you tonight, thinking about your guest. Did it not seem like the timeline was off a little bit?
In which aspect?
Okay, say after the death of Christ.
Right.
When he starts talking about all this travel.
Well, okay. See, and you're right, because it is. And let me just say this, Brent. We did 3 or 4 shows 1 week apart about 6 months ago on this that explains everything in detail. And yes, you're right, and you're being observant here. The Bible side, the biblical side of the narrative of the story is 33 AD, right? Okay, so his side of the story changes. He's saying that in his research, everything pushes up into 60 AD to 70 AD, where the Jewish revolt took place. And that part of the story, yes, crucifixion happened, but it was all much later. Okay, so that you have to go and listen and actually read his book, The Grail, Cypher, which explains it too as well. And he touches upon all of it. And this deals with, he was talking about it today, Palmyra, Odessa, Jesus of Odessa, King of Odessa, the ties directly back to Cleopatra, the Pharaohs, and how the lineage of the two families out of Odessa and going over to Egypt are connected, and how that story was changed. They needed to hide that aspect of it, and the only way to do it was to move it back 30 years and place it there. So that's you're right. You're right.
I see that. I mean, that kind of makes sense. However, I guess this is the first time, and I'm fairly knowledgeable on history, but it's the first time that it's really been brought to my attention that there was so much travel between those countries.
Oh, are you talking about the
out of the Middle East?
Okay. With who though? With Jesus? With Mary? With
Mary? With who do you bring up? Sarah?
Yeah, Sarah, Mary, their daughter, Sarah.
Right.
Okay. Well, again, if you go and if you look at a map and you look where Syria is, and you look at where the ancient Persian Empire was, and where Odessa is, and where it all ties, its relative closeness to Jerusalem, which is not that far from Egypt, too, as well. Everything is right there and very central. Okay,
sure.
So it's not. It's walking distance. I mean,
tying that into France and Britain and those other places, that's quite a journey for back then, right?
Well, you're talking about the Mediterranean and a boat, and the Mediterranean is big, but it's not the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
and this is the other thing. The Greeks, the Phoenicians, the Egyptians. I mean, they were the Romans. They were sailing all over the Mediterranean, and you have to think about that. Think about the trade routes and the way they were bouncing up and down the coast. You wouldn't even have to cross the Mediterranean, man. Just stay close to shore and hit the ports and hit the trade routes and swing around the Mediterranean and go through the Greek islands and head over to Italy and Sicily, and then south of France is right there. If you look. And you just kind of imagine it just a little bit when you look at a map of the Mediterranean and how it would be very easy to just do that. You don't have to you're not crossing the Atlantic. You're not going to be out to sea for 4 months, on the open ocean. It's not that kind of situation there in the Mediterranean, all the way to Gibraltar.
So with it cutting in and out, like it was earlier, I kind of got lost. Was he connecting the Scottish people with the red hair and everything to this lineage?
Yes, and I think he was doing that directly there, and not only with his research, but all of the DNA research that is going on now, and they are trying to get everything cataloged of every civilization, every group of people on planet Earth, right? And just trying to chase things down. And I have to tell you, when you go out of Armenia, ancient Armenia, the highlands there, certainly the Middle East, and you can make direct connections to the DNA in Spain, in Great Britain, up in Northern Europe, and through the Germany area and Poland. It's everywhere, and everything just keeps pulling back to the Middle East. Certainly into Africa too as well, but there is a lot of that direct connection straight out of the Middle East right into Europe. Absolutely, I'm talking direct, not kind of, not a little bit, but direct.
Wow, that's interesting. Well, hey, thanks for taking my call tonight, and Merry Christmas to you guys. Have a great rest of the week.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brent. And I'm going to stay right on the phones. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black.
Hey, Jimmy. It's Fran.
Hey, Fran. How are you?
I'm good. I just wanted to say happy frickin' holidays.
Okay. Happy holidays to you.
And I love the show tonight.
Yeah, it was.
I love Ralph.
Yeah, Ralph is the best. He is the absolute best. I mean, seriously. I mean, I could just sit and listen to Ralph forever. So thank you for...
me too.
Thank you for, not only listening, but thank you for calling in and wishing us happy holidays, and happy holidays to you, and be safe out there. Thank you so much, Fran.
Thank you.
You got it.
You bet. And being an atheist, so-called atheist, it just amazes me. I'm waiting for the winter solstice.
Okay.
On the 21st.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. That's your day. The 21st is your day. All right. Thank you so much, Fran.
Okay. And thank you so much for taking my call.
You got it.
I love you.
Yeah, right back at you, Fran. Thank you so much. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black.
Hey, Jimmy.
Hey.
It's Jim from New York.
Hey, man. How are you?
Great. I got a funny little paradox conundrum thing. Maybe you were raised Catholic like me, so I don't know if you remember this, but you know what last Thursday was?
Last Thursday.
It was the Immaculate Conception of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and I never noticed that before.
Oh.
December 8th, and 17 days later is the birth of Jesus. Now, how does that work?
Oh, that's... Well, thank you for pointing that out, but that's very interesting.
So, yeah.
All right, Jim.
I just wanted to let you know that, Jim. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much, and happy holidays to you.
You too, Jimmy. Good talking to you. Bye.
Yeah, good talking to you. Yeah, that was interesting. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. You're live. 3, 2, 1. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black.
Hey, Jimmy, this is Dusty from Denver.
Hey, Dusty from Denver. How are you?
Good, man. I called in back when Trump got elected that night. I don't know if you remember, but anyway, sick show tonight, dude. I was checking it out at the gym. Really dig it. Hey, I got a question for you, man. I don't really ever hear anybody call in and ask your opinion on things, but I'm just trying to understand or get some insight. Who is your favorite guest to have on your show?
My favorite?
Top three.
Top 3.
Yeah.
Ooh, man, that's a tough one. And I'm gonna, I hate to say this, it's the next guest. I hate to say something like that, or the last guest, or tonight's guest.
Yeah, I understand.
It's tough. There were some very memorable shows. And if you go back, if you really want to go into the history books, go to the Linda Moulton Howe Thanksgiving show from 2 years ago. That was a pretty epic evening. I think it was called The Interview. And
I'm not sure if I heard that one. Actually,
she's been on so many times, but the show that I'm talking about specifically is the one that's called The Interview, because we just talk about her, right? We don't talk about UFOs and cattle mutilations. Maybe we touched upon it, but it was all about her and her life, and that was a pretty heavy evening. The first interview I did with Travis Walton was really good. The interview with Bobby Schroeder, the physicist who talked about the bulk and and Faster Than the Speed of Light, Interstellar Travel was a very interesting show. Oh man, I mean, I can go on, and there's just so many. The obvious ones. The first show that I did with Stanton Friedman back at the beginning, like show number 2, was good. But the show was Stanton.
Yeah, that one was good, man. That one was good. That's one of my favorites.
That's a good one. But the one that he was on his birthday was a great show. His birthday, man, and that was pretty memorable too. So, but then again, you have the epic show with Mike Barra and Dino getting into it over 9/11.
Oh yeah,
that was a great show.
I remember that one too.
That was a great show. Mike Barra with Carrie Cassidy going at it. That was pretty good. That was pretty epic.
That one made me feel a little uncomfortable, just because of like some of like the tension. You know what I mean? It was kind of hard to listen.
Right.
Kind of felt like I was in the room.
Yeah. Well, so did I. So did I. And you know what was funny? Going into that show, I spoke to both of them individually. They're like, "Man, let's have fun. It's okay. You know, it doesn't matter. Let's go." And I said, "Okay, all right." And after the show, I spoke to them. They were like, "Man, it was great. No, man, you know." And so I just think that they were being honest with each other, and that's it. And you have Carrie's got a very strong mind. And Mike has a very strong mind. And you're not going to bend either of them. So you get those two going at it, and the tree's not going to bend, right? It's
they're very dominant people for sure, both of them.
Yeah, it's not even going to break.
I tell you who I like.
Who's that?
I love when you have William Henry on, man. William Henry is just incredible, dude. Just a very genuine guy, man. I can feel it. Just a real nice dude. And he lives in Music City, which is where I'm from.
Yeah, and he's really cool to hang out with, too, as well. And I'm going to agree with you there about William coming on the show. But the thing is, when you bring up somebody like William Henry, then you got to bring up somebody like Robert Schock, or you got to bring up John Anthony West. These are all great shows. Most of the Laird Scranton, right? Most of these, Stephen Mailer, you bring up these Egyptologists that really know what they're talking about Egypt, and that's one of my favorite subjects, and they just want to open up about it. So, yeah, you're right.
It's awesome, man. William Henry is a very smart guy, man. I mean, I'm into, obviously David Hatcher Childress as well. I mean, I live here in Denver, and I did a guided meditation about 3 months ago with David Wilcock and this like band from Indonesia. It was really crazy, and talked to him in the parking lot afterwards, man, for like an hour and a half. And we're both drummers, and we just immediately connected. He's a great dude, and I was probably a little intimidating because I'm like covered in tattoos, kind of a big dude, and but it was great, man. It was probably the most intelligent human being I've ever talked to face to face. I'll tell you that. And we talked a little bit about his personal life, and it just kind of blew me away. His diet, what he does and stuff like that. Just incredible people, man. I mean, just really good guy, really smart guy. You could tell he just has, good energy to him, and kind of really just blew my mind, man. Because I've toured 60 countries, man. It's like 6 years, met a lot of people, and I've never met anybody like that.
Yeah, he's pretty cool, and yeah, you're right. He's great to hang out with, and the last 2 or 3 years, we've always had him on at the end of the year for an end of the year wrap up show. And I just talked to him the other day, and we're trying to straighten that out right now. So we should have him on next week for a Christmas show and an end of the year wrap up. But thank you so much for the phone call, Dusty, and be safe out there.
Heck yeah, man. I know you probably got callers. I wanted to ask you, I think I heard you say one time that you ran sound for Soundgarden on tour back in the 90s. Is that what I heard?
I was touring, their opening band was a band called the Big F. Okay. And the Big F on Soundgarden's first tour, I was the Big F's sound guy. And so because of that, and this was a small tour, man. We're talking about
what year was that?
1989. The Louder Than Love tour. And so we were out with Soundgarden for, oh, man, a long time, 6 months, 9 months, 6 months, something like that. And so when you do that, you're all just one big family, you know.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
we were also touring with a co-headliner. Kind of, we switched things around. Voivod. You remember Voivod?
It doesn't ring a bell. For some reason, I had thought that you'd went out with Soundgarden on a tour with Candlebox.
No.
I don't know where I had
No.
read that. I thought I read some online about that. But...
It might have. No, never Candlebox. It was the Big F, Soundgarden, and Voivod. That was the tour, and Voivod was on for part of it, if my memory serves. I don't think they were. No, we had another band too as well. I can't even remember now. We're talking a long time ago. So anyway, with that. The crews of both bands, everybody just intermixed, you know, and that's the way that just ended up being. At the end of that tour, we were just one big family, and it was sad to see it come to an end.
Understandable. Hey, man, I appreciate you taking my call, man. You and Rita have a good night.
You good? Yeah. Thank you so much, Dusty. Behave out there. All right. Oh, man. I've still got calls on hold, and I'm at the end of the show. All right, I'm going to take one more. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Okay. All right, I'll take one more. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Okay, I'll take one more. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black.
Hi, Jimmy Church, checking in with you from San Jose. This is Paul Barbaro, the hands-on healer.
Hey, Paul.
I love your show. God, every time I hear one of your speakers, I say to myself, especially the guy about Mary Magdalene tonight, it's like, is everything we've been told, I mean everything, just a fairy tale story
right.
to cover something else going?
Right.
I mean, it just blows me away because I thought I knew Mary Magdalene pretty well, having studied her several years ago.
Right.
And man, oh man, this guy was telling me about the orange, the king of orange and all that, and I'm saying, my God, I've heard those words, but I never made the connection.
Yeah, you should go to his website, and Paul, you should pick up some of his books, and it's certainly the Grail Cypher. If I think his first book, or one of his first books, was the Jesus Pharaohs book, and pick those up and check it out because he really does a good job of putting the timelines together and the alternative narrative. It's just well done and well researched.
Yeah, I'm just amazed because even just all the other information out there just seems to be so wrong in light of this.
Right, exactly. And Paul, thank you so much for the phone call.
Okay, I'll talk to you later. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I'm at the end of the show.
Well,
we got to wrap.
Happy holidays. Yeah.
Yeah, right at you, Paul. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I want to finish this before I get out of here. The United States Department of Energy said that they're not going to comply with the request from President-elect Donald Trump's Energy Department transition team for the names of people who worked on climate change and the professional society memberships of lab workers. The response from the Energy Department could signal a rocky transition for the president-elect's energy team and potential friction between the new leadership and the staffers who remain in place. The memo sent to the Energy Department today and reviewed by Reuters contains 74 questions, including a request for a list of all department employees and contractors who attended the annual global climate talks hosted by the United Nations within the last 5 years. Energy Department spokesman Eben Burnham-Snyder said today that the department will not comply. I'm quoting here. Our career workforce includes contractors and employees at our labs, comprise the backbone of the Energy Department, and the important work of our department does to benefit the American people. We are going to respect the professional and scientific integrity and independence of our employees at our labs and across our department. He went on to add, we will be forthcoming with all publicly available information with the transition team. We will not be providing any individual names to the transition team. It has left many in the workforce tripping out, by the way, and they should. Yesterday, it was reported that Rick Perry is expected to be named by Trump to run the Energy Department. The agency employs more than 90,000 people working on nuclear weapons maintenance, research labs, nuclear energy, advanced renewable energy, batteries, and climate science. The memo sought a list of all department employees or contractors who have attended any meetings on the social cost of carbon, a measurement that federal agencies use to weigh the cost and benefits of new energy and environmental regulations. It also asked for all publications written by employees at the department's 17 national laboratories for the past 3 years. Is that insane? It is. I don't even know what to make of it at this point. This is Fade to Black. I want to thank Ralph Ellis. What a conversation. And we will pick up everything this Saturday over on Coast to Coast AM. Tomorrow night, live in the studio, Alex Mistretta is going to be here. We're going to talk about his recent Bigfoot expedition with Steve Murillo and our very own Rick Sinnott. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Kamarian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Paul, Mark T. Kovar, LJ3, Renee, Mark Dunbar, Jonas. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vito, and Mark D. Kovar. Fady by Dale. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy. SpaceboyMusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. Syndication is KGRA, The Planet. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2016 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. Cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe or without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Follow me on Twitter @JChurchRadio. Everybody be safe. Go Beckley Tappy.